kids were driving. And at that point I thought, well, now this is interesting because suddenly the story is so much larger than this one person. The themes become more universal. The legacy continues. It becomes about grief and how we cope with grief. It becomes about familial legacy. It becomes about fathers and sons. And at that point I thought, this is, interesting for me. And I'm the mom of 2 boys, high risk taking boys that I totally don't identify with. And so I identified with Susie's dilemma. And yeah, that's how it came together.
Great, thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned, this is more than just Dan's story. Susie Weldon was, you can tell she's such a strong woman. I wanted to ask, what were the sort of initial conversations like with her when you brought up the idea of doing this documentary, and how did you gain her trust, and how long did that take? Because she opens up about a lot of vulnerable and personal things.
So the initial conversations, I think because I am the mom of 2, and because my idea always was, and my idea with my partners, McLean and Chapman Way, I should include them in the conversation because they were definitely part of this. But my conversations were, how do we keep Tan's story alive? And what she really responded to was, she didn't want to do a film. She'd been approached many times because the story didn't end with Dan. And so suddenly when we had this idea that the story actually is just beginning, I think it really resonated for her. And so Susie's brave and strong and beautiful inside and out. And I think that our connection enabled her to be vulnerable. She trusted me. And she's really a filmmaker's kind of dream come true because she is so open.
Yeah, that's great. And about the sort of timeline of the documentary, was it always planned to sort of end with and build up to the crash? Or, did the news of finding out that the kids' race was going to be in Las Vegas, did that sort of impact how you're going to edit the film in the end?
Yeah, that's like the documentary gods looking down on you, because no, I did not know that was coming. I had no way to know that was coming. And it definitely changed suddenly we went, okay, now we do have an ending. The crash was obviously the end of Dan's story, but how much do you lead with it? How much do you show in the beginning versus the end? There were all those conversations. So editorially, we landed at that ending once the boys found out, totally unexpectedly, that they would be racing there.
Right, yeah, that must have been a shock to everyone when they found out. And as we saw in the end, Randy Bernard declined to comment or be part of this documentary, and I was wondering, at the time there must have been a lot of controversy around the challenge that he had set up for that Vegas race. I was wondering if Susie had any opinions or anything that she wanted to say about that, or was that sort of too much of a sensitive topic to touch upon? We saw Dan's father talking about how he was against him doing it, and the drivers talking about they felt very uncomfortable when they were racing because they knew it was dangerous. Yeah.
In the documentary, Susie definitely doesn't want to go back down the road of that race. Clearly was misinformed and a bad idea, and There were drivers who were not comfortable. I don't know where Dan was on that spectrum. Dan obviously was a risk taker, and they all know what they're signing up for. And you know, Randy Bernard made a decision I'm sure he regrets. But he was, you know, Susie sort of doesn't go down that road because it doesn't really get her anywhere.
Yeah, and I also wanted to ask about, you know, the kids are such a big part of the documentary too, and what was it like when you first kind of had to explain to them or make them understand what you were trying to do, all the cameras pointing at them and trying to capture authentic moments and emotions and feelings that they had. So what was it like working with the kids there too?
Well, it was funny because I am the mom of two boys, so I thought, well, this will be really easy. But it turns out that the boys really preferred my crew over me. So I had two incredible cinematographers, and I was really surrounded by young guys. And so whenever the boys grew tired of me, I would just step back and let them play with the crew. But a part of, you know, if anyone watches Drive to Survive or any of those shows, part of being a driver is really knowing how to handle a camera. And so as much as when they would lose a race, they were not psyched to see Laura show up with camera. You know, it is, I think they, in their own minds, sort of felt like, well, this is part of the deal. If we want to become drivers, this is what you need to be able to handle.
Yeah, and I guess with their father's legacy, they are gonna have eyes on them for the rest of their lives. But yeah, I wanted to pass it to the audience if anyone had questions or comments for Laura. Yes, go ahead. If you can speak up.
This is a really great documentary. Like, a lot of times, like, I feel like watching documentaries, you don't have, like you said, like a perfect storm where you're opening the camera and, you know, just like some really incredible moments. I was wondering, obviously with documentary, a lot of it's made in the edit. Were there scenes that, like, so to speak, where you had to kill your babies in and be like, oh, I wish I could put this in, but your editors or whoever was like, this is not possible for the plot?
Yeah, there was I mean, I shot, so we shot for 2+ years, and a lot of babies got killed. The original, you know, the first cut was super long. But you know, you narrow it down and whittle away and find, with the, you know, weaving of those two narratives, it becomes clear that you're gonna have to get rid of a lot if you're gonna, you know, be able to tell them both comprehensively. So there were some really funny moments that I regret not being in there. There's a whole story about Dan's teeth. At one point, he changed his teeth. He like got massive veneers, and these guys are such good storytellers. And so to hear literally Tony Kanal, Brian Herta, the Andretti's, Chip Ganassi, everyone talk about these chompers that Dan showed up with one day was, you know, it was like, oh please, we have to find a place for that in the movie, but it had to go. And there were lots of others. Yeah, that's the painful part of documentary filmmaking. You have way too much material.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious to know, was that Susie's first time at the Las Vegas Speedway?
Yeah, you know, that was also unexpected. I didn't know that she would want to visit inside the track. And, you know, I think this whole process, she was cognizant of the potential for catharsis, but you don't know until you do it, whether it's traumatic or, you know, or cathartic. But for me, at least, that scene is intended to, because I experienced it as a catharsis, as like a cry that she needed to have, and boy did she cry. Yeah. So I didn't know it was coming, and it was the first, and I suspect the last time she'll go back to the track.
Well, I just wanted to also give you a chance. This was the last screening. What message do you want to leave for your audiences and your future audiences? You know, your film touches on a lot of themes, including grief, love, family, legacy. Yeah, what do you hope audiences will take from this?
I mean, you know, what I said at the beginning, which is you don't have to be a lover of racing, but you can be a lover of racing and hopefully enjoy all the other, you know, the themes that go with this. Ultimately, I think it's a love story. I was sitting with Susie the other day in the screening. She'd seen the movie a couple of times, but in the premiere, you know, it was 3 generations of Andretti's with us. It was really intense, and Susie's watching, you know, in front of this massive audience. And finally I leaned over at one point and I just said, "This is just a love story." And she said, "I know," which makes me happy, you know. And I think we all have to be brave enough to love, and we all have to be brave enough to live the life that we want to live. And there are risks involved in everything that we do, and really nothing's worth it unless you're willing to take a risk. And you know, I commend Susie for allowing those kids to live and do what they want to do in spite of her own concerns. So, you know, I think there's definitely a lesson in that for everyone.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful documentary, and I hope everyone enjoyed. Please give a round of applause for Maria.
Thanks everyone for coming, I really appreciate it.
And this film is eligible for an audience award, so if you would like to vote, have your ticket out, and you can scan it and place your vote that way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.